So there needs to be a disclaimer for this video. A, because I'm not an expert on classical music or classical form, and I'm bound to annoy a few people who are with the way I talk about what sonata form is and the way I'm using it. And B, because we're looking at sonata form very loosely. In fact, I'm going to be changing the definition or definitions slightly because the point I'm trying to make is that sonata form can be used to inspire structure in dance music, and there's sort of a link between the two. So basically, sonata form is a structure that's been used in classical music since the 18th century, mid-18th century. So it was often used in the first movement of multi-movement pieces, so symphonies, concertos, and so on. A good example of a multi-movement piece is Vivaldi's Four Seasons, which I'm sure you've heard. But this isn't a course on classical structure, so I'm not going to bore you with details. However, there's a lot we can take away from this kind of music and a lot we can learn. So I do encourage you to listen to some classical music if you don't normally. I know it can be boring for some people, but it's incredibly complex, and like I said, there's a lot you can take away from it. So sonata form structure basically contains three individual parts. It contains an exposition. So basically the exposition is the presentation of thematic and harmonic tonal materials. That might be, in the case of dance music, maybe a bit of a melody or some part of a chord progression. So the presentation. Then there's another part which is development, and that is the elaboration and contrast of those materials presented in the exposition. So in dance music, this would normally be the breakdown, where you're elaborating on what you've presented so far. And then the final part is recapitulation. Quite a big word, and that's the resolution of those materials, and it's often referred to as the climax in classical music, and I'm going to refer to it as the climax in dance music too. Now, sonata form also makes room for an introduction, though this isn't considered a main part of the structure. It's just sort of added on like it is in dance music almost. The reason it exists is so that the DJ has something to mix into. The point is, though, that you can use sonata form in modern dance music. For example, we might have an introduction, say 32 bars. Let's rename this. And then we might have an exposition, which might start off as a short breakdown, say 8 bars, where we sort of tease the main idea, which might be a chord progression or a melody or both. And that sort of keeps going. And, this might be a bit more complex. We might split this up and say that this is a rhythmic drop, and that it sort of gets rid of the melody, and that the melody starts coming or starts being teased back in throughout this section. And then over here we might have the development section. So this, in modern terms, would be referred to as the breakdown. And then, in this section we might build on, development. We might build on what we sort of brought in here, elaborate on it, and so on. And then finally we have the recapitulation, so the climax. Make sure I spell this correctly. There we go. And that's that. So again, this is not sonata form used in its purest sense, because dance music is a lot more simple harmonically and melodically, and it's not that long. It doesn't contain multiple movements. So the definition does need to be adjusted. I'm simply drawing a link between the two. So you can look at this and you can sort of think, well, yeah, that does make sense. That does follow. A lot of dance music sort of follows that loosely. So you can use it as inspiration, and you'll see that throughout the analysis and so on, when we look at different tracks, that this kind of theme pops up. There's an exposition where elements are presented, there's a development where they're elaborated on, and then there's a climax. So in its simplest sense, this is a very loose structure for dance music. Very loose structure. So I hope that made sense. Just thought I'd point it out. We're not going to go into detail on it, but it's just good to know about. In the next video, we're going to be looking at pop structure, which is very interesting, and you'll find out why. So I'll see you then.